The Tropicana Las Vegas was imploded on October 9, 2024, after 67 years of continuous operation on the Las Vegas Strip. The implosion was watched by an estimated 120,000 people from the Strip and the surrounding area, making it the largest crowd to witness a Las Vegas implosion since the Stardust in 2007. The Tropicana had opened in April 1957 as one of the most opulent casino properties on the Strip, designed by architect M. Tony Sherman in a tropical motif that expressed the optimism and excess of late 1950s American leisure culture. It had hosted Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and the full constellation of the Rat Pack. It had been one of the longest continuously operating casino resorts in Las Vegas history. It was demolished to make room for a baseball stadium. The stadium was not approved by a public vote. It was approved through a Nevada state legislative process that committed approximately $380 million in public funding to support the construction of a facility designed to house the Oakland Athletics, a Major League Baseball franchise that had been attempting to build a new stadium in Oakland for more than a decade, and that had selected Las Vegas as its relocation destination following the failure of that effort. The forensic entry point for this case is not the Tropicana's financial history, though that history is consequential and will be examined. The forensic entry point is the specific mechanism by which a 67-year-old casino resort operating on what is arguably the most commercially valuable land in the entertainment industry was determined to have less value to its owner than the cleared site beneath it. That determination required the simultaneous convergence of three conditions. The first was a Tropicana that had exhausted its competitive viability as a casino resort in the contemporary Las Vegas Strip market. The second was a public subsidy for stadium construction that was available only if a site on the Strip could be secured. The third was an ownership structure. Bally's corporation that had acquired the Tropicana with a specific redevelopment thesis and that found the stadium opportunity more commercially attractive than any casino renovation scenario the market would support. If this is your first case file from this channel, subscribe now, because every episode adds one more layer to what you are about to understand about the architecture of institutional failure. The Tropicana's ownership history between its 1957 opening and its 2024 implosion is a compressed version of the pattern that case file 017 documented in the Stardust, a casino built in one era of Las Vegas, operated through multiple ownership transitions that each extracted value from the asset while deferring the capital investment required to maintain its competitive position, until the accumulated deferred investment and the competitive disadvantage it produced made redevelopment more attractive than continued operation. The Tropicana had been owned, at various points, by entities connected to organized crime, by corporate gaming operators, and by the publicly traded gaming companies that the regulatory modernization of the Nevada gaming industry had eventually produced as the industry's dominant ownership model. Each ownership transition had introduced a capital structure that required the casino to generate returns justifying the acquisition price, which meant each ownership had less capital available for the property investment that maintaining competitive relevance in an evolving strip market required. By the time Bally's corporation acquired the Tropicana in 2022, the property had accumulated decades of deferred renovation investment that would have required hundreds of millions of dollars to address comprehensively, in a strip market where the competitive set had been transformed by the Bellagio, the Venetian, the Wynn, the Cosmopolitan, and a generation of post-millennium megahertz that had established a competitive standard the Tropicana could not match without an investment that its acquisition price made commercially unjustifiable. The covenant that nobody at Bally's corporation needed to read carefully enough was the one embedded in the land. The Tropicana site occupied 35 acres at the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and Tropicana Avenue, the most heavily trafficked intersection in the entertainment industry, adjacent to the MGM Grand and across the street from the Excalibur and the Luxor. 35 acres at that intersection, cleared of a casino that could no longer compete at the level the location's rent required, had a development potential that any competent real estate analyst could identify as exceeding the value of the operating business above it, The specific catalyst that converted that development potential into an actionable demolition decision was the Oakland Athletics. At what point does a historic casino's competitive decline create a moral obligation to preserve it rather than to redevelop the land beneath it? Leave your analysis in the comments below. The appraisal methodology that governed the Tropicana's final years of operation as a casino resort shared the characteristic documented in the Stardust case: the consistent undervaluation of the land relative to the operating business in conventional hospitality appraisal models, and the consistent overstatement of the renovation investment that would be required to restore the operating business to competitive viability. The stabilized value of the Tropicana as a going concern casino resort in 2022 acquired a significant renovation investment before any stabilized revenue projection could be meaningfully constructed. Independent real estate analysts who examined the Tropicana's physical condition and competitive position in 2022 estimated that restoring the property to a standard competitive with the contemporary strip market would require between $300 million and $500 million of capital investment, a figure that, combined with the acquisition price, would produce a total invested cost that the Tropicana's market position and revenue potential could not service under any realistic scenario. That conclusion made the land value argument more compelling than any renovation thesis. The Nevada state legislature's approval of $380 million in public funding for the athletic stadium, structured through a room tax mechanism that did not require a public referendum, provided the specific economic catalyst that Bally's corporation needed to prefer the stadium development thesis over the casino renovation thesis. The appraisal of the Tropicana site for stadium purposes produced a land value figure that reflected the combination of the site strip location, the public subsidy available for stadium construction, and the long-term revenue potential of a Major League Baseball franchise anchor on the most commercially valuable intersection in Las Vegas. That appraisal produced a land value significantly higher than the going concern casino value. The decision to demolish was therefore not a failure of the appraisal methodology. It was its success. The methodology that had consistently underpriced the land relative to the operating business in previous Tropicana ownership cycles correctly identified, in 2022 and 2023, that the land had become more valuable than the business above it, and that the specific opportunity presented by the athletics relocation and the Nevada stadium subsidy had created a window to realize that value that would not persist indefinitely. If the forensic analysis this channel conducts is changing how you read real estate headlines, the like button is how the algorithm knows to send this case file to the next analyst who needs it. The public financing mechanism for the athletic stadium at the Tropicana site was structured through Senate Bill 1, passed by the Nevada state legislature in June 2023, which authorized up to $380 million in public funds derived from a Clark County room tax to support the construction of a 30,000-seat retractable-roof stadium adjacent to the former Tropicana site. The legislative process did not include a public referendum. That absence was not a procedural anomaly. Nevada's stadium financing for other major sports facilities, including the Allegiant Stadium that houses the Las Vegas Raiders, had been structured through similar legislative mechanisms that did not require voter approval. The specific public policy question that the Tropicana implosion raised, and that the forensic framework of this channel is equipped to analyze without rendering a political judgment on the policy itself, is the relationship between the availability of public subsidy and the economic decision to demolish a historic asset. The Tropicana's competitive decline made it a candidate for redevelopment. Multiple alternative redevelopment scenarios existed that would not have required the complete demolition of the historic structure. The availability of $380 million in public funding, specifically structured to support a baseball stadium at a strip location, made the demolition scenario more economically attractive than any renovation or mixed-use redevelopment scenario that would have preserved more of the historic structure. The public subsidy did not cause the Tropicana's competitive decline. It caused the specific form of resolution that the competitive decline produced. A different form of public subsidy, one directed toward historic preservation or mixed-use renovation rather than toward stadium construction, would have produced a different form of resolution. The 67 years of Strip history that the Tropicana embodied were not eliminated by private market forces operating without public involvement. They were eliminated by the convergence of private market forces and public subsidy in a specific direction that made demolition the most economically rational outcome. That convergence was not an accident of policy. It was the product of policy choices that prioritized a Major League Baseball franchise over a historic casino resort, made through a legislative process that was legal, transparent, and not subject to public referendum. The Athletics broke ground on the Las Vegas ballpark in April 2024. The Tropicana was imploded in October 2024. 6 months later, the stadium is scheduled to open in 2028, when the Athletics intend to begin their first Las Vegas season. The site that the Tropicana occupied for 67 years will house a Major League Baseball stadium that will be used for approximately 81 home games per year, plus potential playoff games and other events. A utilization rate that the 35 acres of Strip real estate could support commercially across multiple use cases if the stadium development thesis produces the attendance and ancillary revenue that the public financing justification required. What the Tropicana case reveals in the context of this channel's 29 case archive is the completion of the Las Vegas demolition pattern. That case, File 017, introduced with the Stardust. Both cases document the same fundamental mechanism: a Strip casino whose competitive decline has made the land beneath it more valuable than the operating business above it, whose demolition was facilitated by a specific economic catalyst that converted the theoretical land value into an actionable development decision, and whose 67 years or 48 years of Strip history were eliminated in a matter of seconds by a controlled implosion that crowds gathered to watch as entertainment. The difference between the two cases is the nature of the economic catalyst. The Stardust was demolished because its owner, Boyd Gaming, determined that a private development project justified the land value realization. The Tropicana was demolished because a public subsidy, made available by state legislation without a public referendum, made a stadium development thesis more economically attractive than any private renovation scenario. The Las Vegas Strip has now demonstrated, across 2 generations of major casino demolitions, that the market mechanism for retiring historic casino assets is not bankruptcy, not foreclosure, and not regulatory intervention. It is the patient accumulation of competitive decline until the land value exceeds the operating value, followed by the arrival of a development catalyst that converts the theoretical calculus into an actionable decision. The 120,000 people who watched the Tropicana fall were watching 67 years of American leisure culture collapse in 17 seconds. They applauded. If this case file changed how you evaluate the relationship between public subsidy and the preservation of historic commercial assets, subscribe to this channel, because the next case examines a building that a public subsidy was specifically designed to save, and that the subsidy's design made impossible to save. And in the comments, given the Nevada legislature's authorization of $380 million in public funding for the athletic stadium without a public referendum, what specific public interest standard should govern the use of tax revenue for stadium construction that requires the demolition of historically significant commercial real estate? The case file is open. This content was developed using artificial intelligence tools as part of the research, writing, and production process. All AI-generated material was subject to human review, editorial intervention, and approval before publication. Factual claims, interpretive framing, creative direction, and final content decisions reflect human judgment throughout. This disclosure is provided in accordance with platform transparency standards for AI-assisted content.